With Boro's season pretty much being over, a lot of discussion has turned towards next season and which of Boro's 4 loanees will we look to sign. So let's discuss each of the 4 and whether I think they've deserved the right to be signed for Boro next season.
He's in and he's snuck it across to Hayden Hackney!
Now firstly, before we're going to get stuck in, I just want to say, of course, we've still got 8 games to go. And of course, the fortunes or the impact of these loan signings could drastically change over the final 8 games. For all we know, an injury crisis might give one of these guys a chance and they might end up being pivotal in Boro, maybe making a late run for the playoffs towards the end of the season, and our perception of some of these loan signings might change drastically for better or for worse in the final 8 games. So I am discussing this in the March international break, and of course our perception of these guys might change, but I am going to run through each of the 4 and whether I think right now they should be at Boro next season, starting with Luke Ayling. Of course, we signed Luke Ayling in January from Leeds United, and he will be a free agent in the summer regardless of what Boro do. Now the question is, has Luke Ayling warranted Boro re-signing him in the summer? Being a free agent, he won't cost us anything. He'll already be familiar with the team. Boro will be familiar with him and how he works within our system. So should we? Will we sign Luke Ayling in the summer? I'm going to say no. I don't think we will, and I don't think we should. And it's nothing against Luke Ayling as a character or as a person, because I think he's a fantastic player and a character that I think definitely benefits the Boro squad. He's got the passion, he's got that little bit of shithousery, and he always gives 100% every single game. So I think that type of character is what Boro need in their dressing room. However, I think both his ability and depending on how Boro set up next season might have a say in whether he stays or not. I think firstly, it depends on the system. I think we've seen of late Boro look a lot better, or Luke Ayling looks a lot better in a back 5. You know, either the right wing back when he's got more license to go forward and he's got the covering behind him by the right centre back, or whether he's in the right centre-back position of a back 3 and the wing-back, whether it's Isaiah Jones or whoever bombs on, he suits a back 5. He does not suit a back 4. You know, when he's the right back in a back 4, we are so exposed when he pushes forward and he can't quite get back, and it is a real area of weakness where teams can target Boro. So, depending on our system, might depend on whether we sign him next season. If we're playing a back 4, I'd say absolutely not. If we're playing a back 5, I can see why we would want to sign him next season, but I also think you've got to look at Boro's overall squad. If everyone is fit and we play a back 5, I don't think he gets into Boro's team. I think if you've got a back 3, you've got Clark, you've got Lenihan, you've got Rav, you've got Fry who can play in the centre, and if you play at wing back, you've probably got Isaiah Jones who you'd rather have as the right wing back, and of course Tommy Smith who'll be coming back and is a Boro player. And I think it's important that we stress in this video, Boro's permanent players should always be chosen over any loans. So if we've got Tommy Smith in the team, he's fit once again, I think he's our right back in a back 4, and I think in a back 5 you put Isaiah Jones there, we've got enough centre backs to cover 2. So I just don't think there's a place for Luke Ayling in a fully fit Boro team, and I just think system wise it's probably best he's moved on in the summer and he does get a permanent fresh start, maybe at a lower-end championship side, maybe in League One. But I think for Boro's aspirations, the squad we have, the system we want to play, I don't think we need that stopgap anymore. And I think Luke Ayling will move on in the summer. On to Luke Thomas, who of course we signed on loan from Leicester, despite him being at Sheffield United at the start of this season. Now, I think it's safe to say, without being brutal, Luke Thomas has been a bit of a disaster for Boro as a loan signing goes. He's not looked up to scratch at all. He does not look like he's anywhere near good enough for Boro and what we're trying to achieve. And he just doesn't offer us anything. You know, defensively, he's not strong enough. He's really, really weak. And offensively, he doesn't give us anything. You know, his crossing's not all that great. When we signed him, I did point out his numbers didn't look all that promising. And I just didn't quite understand why we signed him. I think the only reason was Bangura's injury. You know, and even then, when he was getting started over Engel, I was bamboozled because he's nowhere near the player Engel is. So, regardless of whether it's a back five, a back four, Engel and Bangura will always, I think, be the two fighting for that position. And I think Luke Thomas, you know, the only argument is that he's third choice if we have another injury crisis. But even then, I don't think he's anywhere near good enough. And I do wonder where the footballer who was scouted as a potential England call-up only 2 seasons ago, I do wonder where that player is and where that player has gone. You know, maybe he's just lost confidence following a very tough loan spell at Sheffield United this season, because of course they are probably at the moment looking like one of the worst Premier League sides we've ever seen. So yeah, maybe he needs to go back to Leicester. They need to really reevaluate what he needs to get his confidence back and find the right loan club for him. But that for me is definitely not Boro. It's been a bit of a disaster. He shouldn't be, and I hope it isn't here next season. Into midfield, we move on to Lewis O'Brien, who, this is a tough one. You know, it really is, because when we signed him at the start of the season, he was my standout signing of the summer in terms of current established footballers. You know, we brought in a lot of potential where you've got to sit back and say, let's wait and see what happens. He was one of the guarantees for me. You know, when I looked at Lewis O'Brien and I looked at what he'd done, especially in the Championship in recent times, he was the best midfielder in the Championship only a few years ago when Huddersfield got to the playoff final. And I do think the ability is still there. You know, he was unlucky at Forest. He was unlucky that his move to Blackburn didn't materialise. And I think we've seen, alongside Johnny Howson, there's definitely something there between him and O'Brien. And I think all he needs is a run in the team. You know, he got such a serious injury at the start of the season and has only just come back in now. It's not been ideal for him, you know, when it comes to a loan spell, because he spent half of it injured. So it's not really benefited his chances of being signed by Boro or, you know, him getting a chance at Forest. He's been really unlucky. But I think there's a player in Lewis O'Brien, and Boro are not spoilt for midfield options. And I covered this in my previous video where I went through every single permanent Boro player and discussed whether I think they're going to be here next season. So check that out if you haven't already. When I looked at the squad, Boro are going to be very, very light in the centre of midfield, I think, next season. So bringing in a guy, signing him on, who's been here last season, knows the place, knows the club, Carrick knows him well. If we are desperate for a midfielder who I think fits what we want to do, I would sign Lewis O'Brien. Absolutely. I think it just makes sense to do that. However, one big hurdle potentially is the asking price from Nottingham Forest and what happens to them. Because I've seen rumours that they want up to around 8 million for him. Now, I don't think he's worth anywhere near 8 million, and I don't think Boro should even entertain the idea of paying that much money for Lewis O'Brien. I would happily pay 3 to 4 million for him. I think he's definitely worth that. And I think a full season where he's fully fit in Boro's midfield, we would definitely see the benefits and he would repay that, I'm sure. But again, it depends on Forest's valuation and it depends on if they get relegated or not, because a recent points deduction has dropped them very close to the bottom 3. In fact, they might even have dropped into the bottom 3. So they are by no means a guarantee to be in the Premier League next season. And if they get relegated, I think there's a very high chance they bring O'Brien back and he's a starting midfielder for Nottingham Forest if they get relegated. If they stay up, he'll be out on loan again, if not sold. And that's where I think Boro might be one of the first teams they come asking and come knocking to see if they want O'Brien again next season. So it depends on valuation. It depends on where Forest are. But I think for the right price, I would sign Lewis O'Brien and I'd bring him back into Boro's midfield next season. And finally, we've got Sam Greenwood. Sam Greenwood is another very, very interesting one because there was a period in the season where it was a no-brainer to sign him on. You know, at the start of the season when it was all rumoured and it was coming out that Boro had an option to buy for 1.5 million, which I think's pretty much true. I've seen a lot of credible sources back that up. That's a very cheap price to sign a player. 1.5 million is nothing. And I think for what we were seeing from Sam Greenwood earlier in the season, it did seem a bit like a no-brainer. However, I don't rate him. And I think he is maybe living off his brilliant form that he sort of burst into Boro's squad and the goals he scored in and around that good run in October when he scored against Sunderland. Of course, he scored in a couple of fixtures. He scored the goal that won us the game at home to Leicester. Don't get me wrong, brilliant contributions, great moments. But since December, Sam Greenwood has offered us absolutely nothing. And barring any goals and assists, he is ineffective in games. You know, games really, really pass him by, and I feel like off the ball, he doesn't offer us anything whatsoever. And that position could quite easily be filled by a player who's a lot more effective, whether it's off the ball or what. And his goal contributions have fell off a cliff, and his form has fell off a cliff since December. So I think for me, in a fully fit Boro team, Sam Greenwood gets nowhere near it for me. I don't like him up front. I don't really see what he offers us over McGree on the left, Jones on the right, Azaz or McGree in the middle. I just don't see it. And I think Boro could find a younger, better player with more potential for 1.5 million on less wages. And I think we should probably put our focus into doing that next season. And the big reason as to why I don't think Boro will sign him or should sign him is his wages. Because as well as the 1.5 million that's rumoured to be the price Boro can pay to bring him in as an option, it's also heavily rumoured that if Leeds get promoted, his wages will increase significantly. And I will admit, out of the three sides at the top of the Championship right now, between Leeds, Ipswich and Leicester, Leeds are by far the most likely to get top two, in my opinion. So I think the chances of Leeds getting promoted are absolutely massive. So there is a very high chance his wages will increase next season, and I don't think he warrants that anywhere. You know, even if Greenwood was consistent, I don't think he would warrant the wages that it seems like he'll be on. So that alone, I think, is a reason as to why Boro shouldn't sign him on. But as well as that, I just don't think he offers us enough. And I think if we want to spend £1.5 million, we want to spend it on a player who's going to play a part and is going to be a lot more effective than what Sam Greenwood is. Don't get me wrong, he's gave us great moments, great memories, and he's by far, he's nowhere near one of the worst loans we've had in recent history. You know, he's played his part and he's done well earlier in the season. He's been fairly anonymous since the turn of the year. And unless, as I said at the start of the video, unless something changes, injury crisis, and he comes in for the final 8 games and scores in them all and looks a world beater, then it changes. So there is a room for the Sam Greenwood argument to change, but I think from what I've seen up until this point, the fee, the wages, the increase in that, I don't think we sign Sam Greenwood. I think we can find just as good, if not better, for cheaper, on less wages, and we can do that permanently in the summer. So for me, I don't think Boro should sign Sam Greenwood on next season. So there we have it, guys. Out of the 4, I would only bring back Lewis O'Brien. And the good thing is, unlike last season, Boro aren't losing loans who are essentially the bedrock of their team. You know, that's the big benefit coming out of the loans from this season. We're not losing an Archer, a Giles, a Ramsey, even a Mowat. You know, players who played such big parts in Boro's squad and improved us significantly like they did last season. You know, losing them, the overhaul that was needed and the drop-off in quality from last season to this has been massive without them 4. And I think it's not going to be... we're not going to feel the effects of losing these loan players at all, which is a positive. You know, I don't think we're going to be any worse off without any of them. Maybe losing O'Brien in midfield is the only one we might be worse off with, assuming Hackney leaves and depending what happens with Johnny Howson. So that's a good thing. It means Boro aren't going to need the huge overhaul that we had this summer, and I hope it means we can only improve and build on what we've got this season. But that's where I stand with the loan signings, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Which of the 4 you would sign, which you wouldn't, as well as your reasoning in the comment section below. And as always, do subscribe and hit the bell too, so you never miss an upload here on the channel. And as I said, do check out my other video, which I did only a few days ago, where I went through every permanent member of the current Boro squad and where I think they'll be here next season, as well as looking at Boro's overall squad depth and what that might look like going into the summer. So check that out if you haven't already. But until next time, guys, do take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.